Hello, 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Fine. Battery is working.
Oh, where did you get these?
Oh, I'm gonna hold. I have a little.
I'll
I'll get this.
Which one do you think is more? This one? Further from her.
Now this one I have a full tape. 2 hours of tape I have. Here
I know we're not gonna be 2 hours.
We're gonna be here I have half an hour of tape. So you will need to keep an eye. I'll remind you to make sure that it's unfinished. Okay. Let's get the earphones here. Where's the microphone? I should probably. Are you able to? He doesn't have much good hearing.
I know. He told me. Maybe if he puts that things on, he can hear better because it's right against his ears.
So sweet.
Testing.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
It's rolling.
1, 2, 3.
Yeah. Now, will you be able to do a close-up on me now for the question? Can you do a close-up?
Put closer the microphone.
Can you do a close-up on me now for the question? I don't see a light. Is it going? Is it moving?
Tape is in.
Is it recording?
Record is out.
Fine.
So maybe the switch is not on. It's on.
It's on. Maybe the light is not working.
Watch out for that bee.
Yeah, we can bring it to you, but
Have a little switch on when the light goes on.
Well, it's going, so
The little switch is on and off.
that way. Okay, we better start rolling.
Start with the close-up.
Yes, yes, you. I need my question.
Well, I had put it there because of that bee, you know.
I'll take this off just because I need to look objective.
Yes.
I am objective.
You better be.
I did my homework before I became subjective. Okay, so before you, we're going to see all those people talking. I'm interviewing a couple more people. So I'll refer to them and then I'll move into the first question. Can we go?
Yeah.
Okay. You have just heard the people. You just heard people who have expressed their views on a very tragic case that occurred in DuPage County. They feel very strongly that justice was denied several times to two innocent men. And I now have an opportunity to speak with Dora Cruz, the mother of Rolando Cruz, and discuss the ordeal that she has gone through all these past 8 years, having to live with this nightmare. 8 years have almost 8 years have almost passed since your son was wrongfully indicted and then convicted twice. This is happening, I understand, 6,000 times a year to American citizens. Someone is not doing their homework in the judicial system. And there's close to 6,000 victims every year who are affected by those mistakes carried out by prosecutors. Is there any way that you can convey to us what has been going through you for 8 years, knowing that your son is innocent and you're totally hopeless or helpless in doing anything at this point to change the situation? And now she's going to answer me. Close up on her.
I am hopeful. I am hopeful that the system will work. But I don't understand how the system cannot work. It has to work. Somebody is just not listening. Somebody is not, reading the case as it is.
Someone is basically abusing the
somebody
system.
is just neglecting the fact that they should look into it more, and they don't want to hear it. That's, as far as I'm concerned, from what I see. They just don't want to really get in there and find out what it's really all about.
I'm going to ask a question. Is it a white chalk? Is it a white chalk? It really helps me because I was going to jump back and forth and do it myself. Lovely. Why don't we go through this try to kind of live in different periods that you've gone through. Was the time that you discovered that Rolando was indicted for this crime. There's your kid, 19 years old, accused of this heinous crime, and you were awaiting trial, hoping that through the trial the truth would come out. You can't hear? Okay. I'll repeat that. Let's go through this whole case chronologically and relive the different periods. And I think the most important period is the first year after the murder occurred, when 3 young men were indicted for this crime, and one of them was Rolando, your son. When someone broke the news to you, did you feel that it was one big misunderstanding and through a trial this would come to resolution?
Yeah, I did.
How did Rolando feel about that period when he was incarcerated and waiting for his trial?
He knew he was innocent, and he told me, I am innocent, Mom. All of this is going to be cleared up. Don't worry, I'm going to be out of here in no time.
The trial. You attended most of the trial, or all of the trial?
I was there for most of the trial.
Can you describe to us what happened in the trial? Can you describe to us the jury, the mood, as you were kind of observing what was happening there?
Everybody had already judged them.
You could sense that.
Everybody was like, they were guilty, now they have to prove their innocence. people come in there and just write out mine.
Among the witnesses.
Yes.
Was the courtroom packed?
Yes.
And that's a very big courtroom.
Yes, it was.
Was it packed mostly with pro-state or pro-victims' families, relatives, do you think?
Victims, the family, all the family, friends, anybody and everybody that they knew, I guess.
Did you feel like you were being ostracized, you were treated like an outcast, that people were pointing a finger at you, that you were the mother of this horrible creature that the prosecution was trying to depict? Or did you...
I didn't even bother to even think anything. I felt that my son was there, and I was there for my son. What everybody else was thinking or what everybody else was doing, it was no concern of mine, and it didn't bother me. They were there for their own purpose. I was there for mine. Whether they were attorneys or whether they were, just people going in there to, there were a lot of attorneys just going there to listen to what was happening. And the press, all of it. I was in shock. I didn't know what anybody else was doing. I just,
Just fix your microphone. Just to say that because of the razor. Don't touch it much better. And touch my voice also. Dora, I know it's going to be real hard for you, but can you relive for us the day that the verdict came down? In 1985.
horrible. It was just unbelievable. These people had missed out on all the things that were going on in there.
They were not interested in really doing their homework.
Nobody, like I said, it seemed like everybody was convinced from the first day they walked in there, and they didn't really bother to hear what all was going on. Not even the judge looked like he was interested.
A juror told me that the jury foreman announced to the other jurors at the very beginning of the trial, if they're here, they must have done something. And this is one of the things that shocks me, and I bring it out again because some of you will become jurors. And I beg of you not to make up your mind until you have listened to the evidence. Because had the jury listened to the evidence, we may not have had to sit here 8 years later and discuss this case. Now, Rolando was on death row and you were in Texas, and there was a distance problem, and the remainder of your close family was in Texas with you.
My immediate family was.
Yeah. How old was your youngest daughter when this all happened?
She was just 4 years old. She had just had a birthday.
Rolando tells me that she has a very, very good attitude about this whole thing. And she really keeps his spirits up.
Yes, she does. She's always worried about him, always wanted to know how he's doing. If our attorneys happen to call him, she happens to answer the phone. The first thing is, well, did you see him last time? What did he say? What did he do and how does he look? And what is he doing now?
And does she write a lot to him?
She talks to him, he calls all the time.
So your phone bill is running in the hundreds of dollars.
It's tremendous. My phone bill is just outrageous.
So we know Bell benefits from our prison system, doesn't it?
AT&T is paying a lot of people, in my phone bill.
Yeah. When the Dugan information came up, I know Mrs. Hernandez was ecstatic. She was interviewed by newspapers, and she felt that this was going to be the end of the road of this nightmare. And she just felt that, yes, DuPage County made a mistake, but they'll realize now that they did it, and they will amend their ways. And she was truly hopeful. What was going through your mind when you heard about Brian Dugan?
I was like her. I was really excited about it. I thought, my God, in fact, I had read in the paper, even over there in Texas, about the crime. I had seen it in the paper before. And even when I first saw it, I wondered, my goodness, that's so close to back home. You wonder, these people are just out there on the loose, And then a little later, I had a phone call that he was also, admitting to this other crime. And I was like, my God, it is really possible he done this. I mean, this really could really be the man they're looking for. And then I saw pictures of him and sketches of him in the paper down there. And from the sketches and things that I saw from the first trial, it looked like the same man. So I said, oh, thank God, let's hope this, this is going to be all cleared up. And then I was very disappointed when DuPage didn't even want to get in there and investigate. Yeah. All I could say was that if it was my daughter or if it had been any of my children, I would have wanted to investigate it. I would have. If they had told me they had 10 people out there that they thought they were suspects in any form or shape, I would have demanded for them to investigate them too, because they don't have any, any evidence on these other 3 young guys. And it just wasn't right. I would have wanted all of them investigated. Dugan should be investigated and should be cross-examined and everything. I don't understand why they didn't want to do
Well,
this.
newspapers did investigate him.
Yes, but DuPage should have done that
Yeah,
too.
DuPage will not
Why won't they do it? What are they afraid of?
I think they're afraid of the truth. That's what I think.
That it's going to prove all their mistakes they made that they overlooked?
Well, there is always a fear of being subject to a lawsuit, and I've spoken extensively about that before. Intention of bringing this to a lawsuit. He just wants to clear his name, and he wants to get out and start with his life. So I just personally can't understand the behavior, and I don't attempt to understand their behavior any longer. It just goes beyond any realms of logic. The second trial, did you think that was it? We were going to make it? We were going to succeed?
I really did. I really thought they were going to really look more into it and find out that all these things they had, they didn't have nothing on them. They showed it over and over. And it was like the jury was there, and it was like, well, these guys were already on trial before, so they were convicted once before, so they must be guilty.
So there was just an assumption of guilt.
That was all to it. It was just, open and shut case. They're guilty. They were here before, and they were tried before, so that's it.
Would you say that the shock the second time was even worse than the first shock? Because at least now you knew who did it, and now you knew the answers.
It was unbelievable. It was a tremendous shock. I just couldn't believe all that. How could they turn around and come up with such a verdict? You are a citizen of this country, and I don't know how much experience you've had with the justice system,
Has it just opened your eyes to a whole new world out there?
Yes, it had. We never, in my entire family generations, that I'm already like the third generation from here, and we never had any problems in the whole family. And this is all new to the entire family. We never had encounter of any kind, with the law, other than maybe a traffic ticket, but otherwise nothing else.
You watch TV now and read articles with a much more careful approach.
Yes, I do.
When we read about suspect, our first instinct is, well, they're guilty, No one usually even thinks that there's a possibility that if the paper is written on someone that he might be innocent. Do you now look at articles about people who have been arrested as possible victims? Looking at those articles with a much more careful eye.
Yes, I do. I do look at them a lot more carefully. And I do follow a lot more cases more carefully than before. Maybe it never had happened, nothing like this to me or to anybody close to me, not even a distant friend, I never knew of anybody that friends or anything that ever had any problem like this, or any encounter with the law, like that they had to get so involved and fight and nothing, not ever.
I would like to, if possible, to talk about Rolando in his childhood, because one of the things that prostitution did in both crowds is try to destroy him as a human being, to destroy his personality. And one of the things that I did when I began to study this was to get to know Rolando and to interview him and to find out who Rolando really is. I found him to be extremely energetic, enthusiastic, happy-go kind of person. Very talkative.
Yes,
very friendly. Perhaps tries to interfere and get himself into situations. He likes to intervene if there's a problem, or there's a fight, or there's a misunderstanding. He likes to come in and intervene on that and solve the problem. He likes to solve problems. He's very sociable. How was he as a child, if you'd like to just go back and...
He was a real good kid. He used to, when he was real small, I used to buy him all those Tonka cars and trucks and things, and he just stayed right around the house. Made little roadways on the driveway. Sometimes the girls would go out there and give him a hard time and mess up his streets, and he'd say, "Oh, you messed up my street. That was my garage," and rebuilt again, right? If it was winter, he'd spend a lot of time in the house, right in the kitchen because of the floor, and he had little lines. And as he got a little older, if the girls didn't want to go with me somewhere, Ron always went with me everywhere. If I went to my mom's, it was 6 o'clock in the morning, Ronnie came along.
Because he was younger than the girls.
Well, yes, but he was also an only son. I had 2 daughters and 1 son, so I would tell him, "Come on, let's go." And we're just going to Mom's for pick her up to go to the store or something, right? And he came along. And my girls were in sports, and we always went to all the games, wrestling matches, basketball, football games, to volleyball, because one of my girls played volleyball most of the time. And in the summer, she played softball, my oldest. We always went to things like that. And when he was old enough, I signed him up for the Little Leagues. Practice one time, he got hit really bad, right on his mouth. And that just took that out of him. He just didn't want to play Little League anymore. He was afraid of a ball.
It's a dangerous sport for
So,
little kids.
and he was only like 7 years old, so it was, you know.
How did he like school?
He liked school. He was he was a real good student. He had real good grades.
Because I can see now that he's very smart. He's got a lot of very good grades in his.
At one time, he was like lacking, you know, like, school. So he was just letting go of everything. And then one of his teachers called me up and told me he wanted to talk to me, and he wanted Ron to come too. So we went. He was in junior high. And I went to school and I took him with me. And they told me how he was going to fail because he wasn't keeping up with his grades. And I says, well, what are you going to do about that, you know? And he said, well, what are my choices? So they told him he had to take all those tests all over again, or he could master it. And he says, okay, I'll master it. He went in the next day, he had tests on everything. He mastered everything. Came out with a high score.
It was just an attitude problem, not
He had an A on
aptitude.
everything, you know? And I was disappointed. I wanted him to fail so he knew that he had to work hard at this, you know? And no, he passed all his tests and everything.
Because I know that in high school he did slack off school and had an attitude problem, and yet he did his GED in a jiffy. He had no trouble doing his GED once he decided to do it.
Yes, he did.
You want to talk about why he got into this mess? People have discussed this plenty of times. Is there anything that you spoke about yesterday to Telemundo that might be we should perhaps bring up here also?
Is this something
No, I'm not talking about.
No, basically then talk about how did I feel, what did I think about it. Basically what they talk about.
Is
What
there
did I
anything
think?
about characters, about Nicarico, about attitude, and those who convicted him?
I already made my point, but they should look at that. I don't want to make it too long. The shorter we do it, I think the better, because you know later on you're going to have more. There's gonna be, you know, when all this starts up, that's when you really want to get out there and do more.
Let's talk about the future then, maybe, because the legal system has failed. There's hope that his appeal will come through for a third trial. But basically, the legal system in the lower court has failed miserably in Rolando's case. Do you have hope that maybe this case will be resolved on a higher level, either by the Supreme Court or by people responding to this injustice in a way that they responded to other injustices like the Randall Adams case and other famous cases?
I do. I think that next time he goes to court, that they will have more things, you know. And I do believe that if anybody has anything to say that, hey, you have to prove this. Not just because somebody says there's this car and there's this. If he didn't have one, how could he be in a car like that? Everything that they have showed me, they haven't showed me that he was there. They have never proven to me that he did it. Not whatsoever.
And of course, you can also judge from your own son. I mean, being objective, you could see that the case was very, very weak. In fact,
Yes,
there was no case.
there was no case. No case whatsoever. In fact, when I very first came and that the first case went through, and the very first day that I was there, and the attorneys introduced the parents of the other young guys that were there. They themselves says, hey, this is going to be cleared up so fast, because it's all a big mistake. And
has this shattered your belief in God or in
No.
some faith, in faith?
Not in God.
And in God.
No.
You believe that it's people who mess up things, not God.
Yes. People are the ones that are just so naive to certain things.
Mm-hmm. Well, I hope we win. I hope you win. I hope that justice prevails in this case, and Rolando is out within a couple of years.
Oh, I hope so.
And that-
I know he will be. Whenever he's out because he's innocent. He's not going to get out just because they say, well,
Of course.
it's just because.
A crime like that.
He's going to be out because he is proven innocent, and people will see that he's innocent. Not just because somebody feels like they're going to have someone locked up and, well, we already cleared this case, let's pick up this man and stick him in there. That's not good enough. I want to be, positive this person did it, not just because they decide. Like with him, I feel like they just decided they want to close this case. It was so big of a case. They made such a big thing besides that it was such a horrible thing that happened. And then it was just like, hey, let's make everybody feel good and let's just stick these people in there, And that's not right.
Is it still rolling?
Maybe 3 minutes.
3 minutes. One of the jurors in Hernandez's trial said to me that he was sitting in that trial and it was as if Alex Hernandez was a ping pong ball
It was sad.
and not a human being. They were
It was
just
so sad
using
the way
him
they
as a-
did that. It was so sad. Everybody knew that. I mean, how could they not know? I never knew these people before. And just to see what was going on there, it was horrible how they were doing, how they were doing Hernandez. It was horrible how they were doing Buckley. And it was miserable for their families. I could see that.
Oh, I
know.
can't even begin to explain, having spoken to the three families, the suffering and the financial cost. I realized that Cruz and Hernandez didn't need lawyers, didn't have that type of financial hardship. You know what? Just we'll use this one. Yeah. Is there a group shot? Okay. I'll just yeah, I'm not finished yet. Here, let's put this down then. Having interviewed all the three families that have been involved in this case, Buckley family, Hernandez and Cruz family, I can't even begin describing the pain, the physical pain, the mental anguish, the suffering it has caused, the effect it has had on everyone's health. And I wish that when juries make their decision, they can look into the whole picture. I mean, how they convicted those men is a mystery to most of us. But to realize that their decision has had such a devastating effect on so many hundreds of people, besides the immediate family, all those who are now trying to change and fight to bring out the justice and truth, it's affecting hundreds and hundreds of people. Anything you want to say about that? My comment. We'll close.
It has had a very bad effect on a lot of people. I can understand that, especially people that are out there, just parents just like myself. And they all have children and sons and maybe even young daughters at home like I do. And we all want justice, all of us. It would happen to anyone. It's just so sad that it happened to my son. Could have been anyone else's.
Absolutely.
And for that fact is that everybody needs to know what is going on with the system. Why and how did it fail? Then where did it fail?
I even question the ability of the average juror to handle a situation like that where the information is being so convoluted to confuse the juror rather than clarify the information. I sometimes think that jurors cannot handle this. That's my feeling, certainly in the Nicarico case, and certainly in other cases where the evidence is
The same.
similar. But thanks so much, and I hope next time we meet, it's in freedom for
Oh, I hope so.
Cruz and
It'll
all of
have
us.
to be. We'll have to be that way.
Thank you so much.
God bless you. Thank you. It's okay. Good.
What she did was she thought it was just one person, so I had to get a special. What time is it? What? We. Oh, you did? Okay. I can always play it again.
Yeah, I do like that.
The question is because we have already passed.
This is
Some
quite,
items, those would have to go back to the committee with that recommendation.
everything goes back, that's right. Roll call vote.
Carr. Case. Coy.
Yes.
Pimento. No. Heath. No. Stuckey. Cooley. No. Mayo. No. Merkel.
Aye.
Moy.
Aye.
O'Shea. No. Stankow.
Aye.
Purcell.
No.
Renfro. Aye. Ross.
Aye.
Ross. Aye. Stanford.
Aye.
Hillerstrom.
Okay, motion to go back to committee, 11 nays, 12 nays, 2 absent, fails. Next, okay, we're going to call the issue now. Is there an amendment?
I'm going to offer an amendment.
There is an amendment that stands.
There is an amendment.
I will accept Mr. Sosa's amendment as part of my amendment,
You
to make it
yield.
only to do with helicopters.
So we have uniformity. You yield to Mr. So. What is your amendment, sir?
He is accepting.
Okay.
Is it better? Is that better? Yeah. Oh, can I go? Yeah. Okay. My name is Janda Dominic, and I live in Elmhurst, and I was one of the key supporters and circulators of the petition for the all three bonds to go to referendum. My viewpoint is in trying to look at both sides of the issue of government trying to provide services as at the most efficient cost dollar, as well as be accountable to the taxpayers. So looking at both those issues, given that the governor has the tax cap will go into effect on October 1st, our great concern has been that with the rising property taxes that with the tax cap going into effect, then that we have seen a rush of local governments to hurry up and pass bond issues that they may not have felt otherwise they would have done, but to avoid voter input. One of the things that we like to see in my group, that I co-founded in Elmhurst, was that we simply are trying very hard to work for the best possible services that the taxpayers feel they can afford to pay for. But we feel that these 3 bonds, the issue that we were circulating these petitions were not the merits of the bonds, but the way it has been handled given the tax cap. We never once, when we went out to circulate the bonds, told people that we were making a judgment on any of the merits of the bonds. Our entire issue had to do with voter approval, and we felt that because all 3 bonds came in just shortly after the act was signed by the governor, that clearly we feel it was an attempt to skirt the voter approval, which will, of course, be required after October 1st. And I might say that clearly we feel that the voters are crying out for input. They're crying out for reform on these tax issues, and they are going to. We heard from people after people, whether in Elmhurst or all over the county, that they are furious with the fact that they do not have their right heard on these issues. So our point in circulating the petitions was simply that it was an opportunity of the voters' opinions to be heard. In fact, we said to people very frankly, you may support all 3 bonds. That's fine. You may support 1, 2, whatever you wish. It's your choice, but we wanted to make sure they had the right to vote. And really that's what this is all about, is making sure the voters have that input as provided to them by the tax cap. And we view this rush to pass these without that voter input as a clear intent to violate the voter input, and that's what it's all about. We want to bring the voting public back into an equal partner process with the elected officials, and I think the public is crying out for that opportunity. So that's it. We have, and if it went to a referendum, if all 3 bonds went to a referendum and all 3 bonds were voted in, I could live with that. Our organization could live with that, because the whole point of our effort in circulating these petitions was the voter right to have their voices heard. And we do not feel that the county board, if they vote not to go to a referendum on these issues, we feel that they are absolutely denying the voters that access, that input. And they have to pay the price then. When they all come up for election in the spring, they're going to have a lot of answering to do to the public as to why they did not take the effort and the time to involve the public in this process. And I think that's basically what it was all about for our organization, trying to involve the public very much and a hands-on with the county officials in all of us doing our homework, the public as well as the county board officials, to try to get the best services for the dollar. Thank you.
I was one of the petitioner passers, and I wrote a letter to Mr. Body saying that I felt on August 28th that they'd made a mistake in taking the bond issue directly to the county board. I felt that this group of bonds, because they were brought in after the 1st of July, they basically said that we don't care what the public thinks. We don't care how you look at it. This is the kind of money we want extra. And I say to them, this money that they have for roads and for the jail and for the stormwater were already on our tax bills. They just wanted more, and more they were going to get regardless of how the public felt about it. We got 14,000 signatures in less than 3 weeks. It took us about 10 days to mount the campaign, and after that, we had no problems getting citizens of DuPage County to sign it. We just didn't have enough foot soldiers to get the 25,000 we needed. If we had had another week, we would have surpassed the 25,000. People are angry about the way government officials thumb their noses at the public, and they will do as they wish continuously without us taking a stand to stop them.
Did you find that some people didn't know what this was all about in your circulation of the petition?
Yes, we did, and we had to stand and explain, and a lot of our time was explaining what the petition was, that it was to give them the right to vote on any referendum that is passed after the 1st of October. And the petitions had the date of March 17th, which is the primary date, listed on them. And they wanted to know, well, yeah, I want stormwater taken care of in our area. Say, well, that's okay. They already have 7 cents on your tax bill for that. And then I was told by Mr. Body in one of the things that he sent me that he was allowed to tax clear up to 25 cents if he wanted to on real estate. His point is, Mr. Body's point is, that he has the authority by virtue of the fact that the public elected him to do as he pleases. And I'm sorry, but that's not the case. And this will come to an abrupt end because we cannot have public officials who deny citizens their right to have a say in how many holes you cut in our pocket to let the change drop out 1 penny at a time until we are bankrupt.
Lovely.
Sometimes I'm better at.
It depends how angry you are and how concentrated.
Yes. Pull it together.
That's great. Do you know if anyone else wants to talk before I leave? Because I have a... No, I'm going to do a total close-up on you.
Where's the
But-
lens? Because the lens looks like it's looking at my chest.
What I'm going to do is raise it a little bit higher so we'll get you as high as possible.
So I'm wearing really,
A little higher as possible. No, we can't see any of that. Don't worry. Okay, now I've got a good shot. But you know what I didn't bring? I didn't bring the microphone.
Hi, little chickadee.
Beep, 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 beep. Beep, 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 beep.
Hi, little chickadee.
Beep, 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 beep.
Just keep the microphone. Since I'm always seeing your face, keep it right here so we'll still have a good day.
Oh, this is on the Nicarico.
That's all we're talking about.
Okay, I thought you wanted the bond issue thing.
Oh no! Are you ready for that? Have you got your thoughts put together?
Not yet. Give me a minute.
Okay.
Okay.
I can see the batteries flashing, so I'm waiting to go get another. Okay. Put this a little bit lower. That's fine. I think I'm going to put you at an angle. Let's see how you're on the profile.
That's when all my chins show.
Okay. I'm ready.
I believe on the Nicarico case there are too many questions that have not been answered. I believe that justice will never be known unless Brian Dugan's testimony is admitted. I believe that the excuse that it would not be right for him not to get the death penalty is stupid because I don't feel that the Nicarico trial is any less or more horrific than the other deeds that Brian Dugan did. I feel that justice has not been served. I think many of the aspects of the trial have been self-serving, and I think these two boys deserve the full beam of sunlight on this case vis-a-vis having Brian Dugan's testimony entered.
That's all I'm going to say. Fine.
I mean, I could get into a great big long dissertation, but I don't think the main thing that bothers the main thing that bothers me is the
Hello, hello, hello. It's okay. It's okay. It was the wrong battery. The battery was the wrong way.
Well, if not, then I'll keep this, I'm gonna put the camcorder down box behind here.
Okay, let me just leave me a regular microphone just in case.
In this box.
Great. And then I'll do a couple sentences and I'll take them out and see what they sound like. That was Dora Cruz. That was Dora Cruz, and I apologize for being unable to finish this interview. We had some serious audio and wind problems. A couple of things we discussed after we could not continue was the unbelievable pain that this case has caused so many people, those who were directly involved in the case, this was Dora Cruz, the mother of Rolanda Cruz, and I apologize for the audio and wind problems that we experienced during this filming. We were unable to finish the conversation because of that, and there were just a couple extra points that we discussed after we were cut off. We discussed the impact that the jury's decision has made on both the immediate family and many other people who have been surrounded. Okay. This was Dora Cruz, the mother of Rolando Cruz, the man who was accused falsely, many of us believe, of the murder of Jenny Nicarico in Naperville, and we discussed a number of things that. This is a third trial. This was Dora Cruz, the mother of Rolando Cruz, and we apologize for the audio problems and wind problems that we had experienced during the videotaping. We were unable to do this whole interview again because Mrs. Cruz was on her way down to Menard, and she was going to continue from there to ride back home to Texas. We discussed a couple of things after we had experienced the serious problems. We had problems throughout the taping, and we spoke about the impact that this tragedy has had on both the immediate families and the surrounding people who have been involved in this case in some kind of a capacity, families, neighbors, observers of this case. It seems that this case has an ability to get people extremely involved and extremely upset and extremely emotional. Dora also said that what happened to her son can happen to anyone, and this is something that I have tried to emphasize also by producing this show. No one is immune to injustice, and it is regrettable that justice can be blind. Our next program will be devoted to Amnesty International, an organization that... The program that follows this is on Amnesty International, an organization that has fought for both abolishing the death penalty and fighting on behalf of prisoners of conscience throughout the world. I hope you enjoy the program. I was waiting for you so I could put the table away. I closed the camera.
Excuse me?
I closed the camera.
Yeah, I saw that.
This was Dora Cruz, the mother of Rolando Cruz, and we apologize for the ongoing audio problems we had. The wind, which necessitated it, which ultimately made it impossible to continue the interview. There were just two points that Mrs. Cruz wanted to emphasize, which may have been spoken in briefing during the interview. The first one was the impact that this case has had on both the immediate families of both the defendants and the victim's family, and the impact it has also caused for those in the periphery who have followed this case, whether it be friends or lawyers or even observers. This case has caused untold emotional upheaval to many people, and it's strange because I just spoke to some jurors from Alex Hernandez's second trial in Bloomington, and one of the jurors told me it almost destroyed her marriage. I can assure you it's almost destroyed a few other marriages. The other thing that Mrs. Cruz wanted to emphasize was that if this thing happened, the other thing that Mrs. Cruz wanted to emphasize was that if this could have happened to her son, it can happen to anyone. No one is immune to injustice. True, It happens more often to women, to minorities, blacks, Hispanics, and to people who cannot afford a good lawyer. We are seeing this pattern repeat itself over and over in our society, in our country, and I think testimony to that is the number of talk shows and miniseries that are being devoted to people who have been erroneously convicted. There is no doubt in my mind that the Nicarico case will be told and retold in books, in films, in documentaries, because the injustice experienced in the Nicarico case is shocking and beyond comprehension. The justice in the Nicarico case The next program will be on the work of Amnesty International, a human rights organization that works on behalf of thousands and thousands of prisoners of conscience throughout the world. It has also an agenda in which it opposes the death penalty, and while many people in the United States disagree with the philosophy, while many people in the United States in particular disagree with the philosophy of Amnesty International when it comes to the death penalty issue, it's interesting to observe some of the arguments that Amnesty International raises in some of its documentaries. I hope you enjoy the program. For Community Focus, I'm Hannah Bernstein. Goodbye. Hello. This is hopefully the last trial. I wonder if I should close it. This was Dora Cruz, the mother of Rolando Cruz, young man who has been falsely accused of killing Jenny Nicarico. And due to serious audio problems and wind, strong wind, we couldn't conclude the interview. What Dora Cruz wanted to say, a couple more points. One was in regards to the impact that this case has had on not just the immediate families, the families of the victim, and then the families of the defendants who were wrongfully accused. This case has affected many, many hundreds of people in the periphery, people who have been involved in this case either as lawyers or support for both sets of families. It's caused many marital problems, I am told, by quite a few people. The stress has been unbelievable. And one would like to believe that this case could have been resolved logically, honestly, justly, but this has not been the case. Rolando Cruz sits on death row. Alex Hernandez has been sentenced to 80 years, a big improvement for DuPage County. In as far as justice is concerned, they have not executed him or do not wish to execute him at this point. The other thing that Mrs. Cruz wanted to say was that if this happened to her son, this can happen to anyone. No one in the United States is immune to injustice. We are hearing over and over again that people are being erroneously convicted. The statistics indicate about 6,000 cases of wrongful convictions every year. Not all of them are murder, of course, but that's enough to raise some doubts about the efficiency of our system at this time and the manner in which jurors think and evaluate the information that they're asked to evaluate. What else did I want to say? It also is shattering to know that those who cannot get good lawyers, and usually they are women, minorities, blacks and Hispanics in particular, that it is concerning to know that if people can't afford good lawyers, they can get, it's concerning to realize that the poor in this country, those who cannot afford proper legal representation, are the ones who are most often erroneously convicted. Once the mistake has been made, the damages and correcting the damages are extremely difficult. The lessons, this is definitely one of the reasons that I have been so involved in covering this case and studying this case. And I want to know that there will be light at the end of this tunnel, and justice will prevail, and Cruz and Hernandez will be freed. Okay. It is very concerning to know that in this great country there are people who can't afford lawyers, good lawyers, therefore they are more easily found guilty of crimes they didn't commit. We're seeing this over and over, manifested in talk shows and television, mini drama series. This is a very, very prevalent problem. And until we become more sensitive to analyzing information, analyzing evidence, judging our peers very carefully, we are going to see Cruzes, and we're going to see Hernandezes, and we're going to see Randall Adamses all over the country. And I would like to see this stop. I think many of you agree with me. This has to stop. And in this case, in the Nicarico case, I don't think that DuPage County could get away with this injustice. So I can only hope that justice will prevail. The next program will be on the work of Amnesty International. Amnesty International is a worldwide, well-known, Nobel Prize-winning organization that fights on behalf of prisoners of conscience throughout the world. Amnesty also has taken a very strong stand on the death penalty. They would like to abolish the death penalty. Their arguments are interesting, and I hope you enjoy the program. For Community Focus, I'm Hannah Bernstein. Goodbye. Goodbye. For Community Focus, I'm Hannah Bernstein. Goodbye. Trial number 2. They're up here. Total coins. To remove this one, number 3. Due to serious audio problems that we experienced throughout the taping of this program and a strong wind, we had to actually stop the taping towards the end. And since Mrs. Cruz was continuing down to Menard to visit and since Mrs. Cruz was continuing down south to Menard to visit her son and then to proceed back to Texas, to where she lives, we just couldn't redo this interview. So there were a couple of points that Mrs. Cruz wanted me to emphasize in case this was not well heard or well explained throughout the interview. The very first thing she wanted to emphasize was the terrible impact that this case has had, not just on the immediate families, which have been devastated by this tragedy, but by those in the periphery, the friends of both sets of families, the victim and the defendants, observers, neighbors, the lawyers, their support system, the state's attorney's office, the detectives. Everyone has been affected by this case in some way or another. Of course, those who have been the victims of this injustice have suffered the most. And we can only hope that this will be amended at some point in the future. The other thing that Mrs. Cruz wanted to emphasize was that if this thing happened to her son, the second thing that Mrs. Cruz wanted to emphasize was that if this tragedy could have happened to her son, it can happen to many, many other people. And that, of course, raises some questions about our judicial system and how certain people can be more easily convicted for crimes they did not commit. We are seeing this happen especially to those who cannot afford lawyers, that is, women, poor women, Hispanics, and blacks. They are convicted blacks. This has become an endless source of material for talk shows and mini drama series, and it certainly raises some question about the judicial system at this time. We have been flooded as a result of these erroneous convictions. We are now flooded with talk shows and mini drama series that describe some of those cases. And one cannot but stop and wonder what is going on with our system. If we cannot correct the system, can we at least educate the jurors who are supposed to be objective observers and judges of this case to please judge their peers with a little more care and a little more scrutiny. In interviews that I've had with jurors on the Nicarico case, they took for granted things that were never presented as evidence. They took for granted that Cruz, Hernandez, and Buckley must have been there together, even though no evidence was presented to show that. They took for granted certain assumptions that Brian Dugan and the whole Brian Dugan evidence was just a ploy by the defense they believed that the Dugan evidence, some of the jurors, for instance, believed that the Dugan evidence was just a ploy to divert the attention of the jurors from the real facts of this case, when in fact Dugan is the man who committed the murder. The jury, some of members of the jury did not want to know that. They were not interested in the Dugan evidence, even though Dugan was the key to justice in this case. We must be more careful in judging our peers. We cannot take anything as granted. We have to use our intelligence and judge as carefully as we can. We are the ones who don't have elections to worry about. We're the ones who aren't as subjective, regretfully, as prosecutors might be and sometimes defense lawyers are. We don't have political calculations when we go and judge our peers. Therefore, the system of the jury should remain. We, potential jurors, have to learn to judge more carefully. One can only hope that there will be light at the end of the tunnel, that Cruz and Hernandez will receive a fourth trial and receive also the right to a fair trial, something they've never, ever experienced yet. Our next program is about the work of Amnesty International, a worldwide human rights organization that won the Nobel Peace Prize in 1977. Amnesty International also works on behalf of prisoners of conscience throughout the world. It also works to abolish the death penalty. And their arguments are interesting, especially in a country like the United States, where so many people approve and support the death penalty. I hope you enjoy the program. For Community Focus, I'm Hannah Bernstein. Goodbye. Due to serious wind and audio problems that we experienced, we actually had to stop the interview with Dora Cruz, the mother of Rolando Cruz, in the middle. I think we did cover a lot of material, but she had to continue right after that interview down to the Menard prison to visit her son, who is on death row, and right from there to proceed to Texas, so there was no way we could redo our interview. We weren't aware of all those problems until we went back to the studio and looked at the material. So we apologize for some of the audio problems that you have experienced, especially in listening to Mrs. Cruz. Her microphone wasn't operating properly. Mrs. Cruz wanted to make a couple of very important points that were covered, I think, in the interview, but she really wanted to emphasize them, and I do so for her. She wanted to talk about the impact that this tragedy has had on not just the immediate families that have been involved in this case, the victim's family, who have to live the horror of their daughter's death and brutal murder, and the defendants who have been erroneously convicted and have to go through the ordeal of proving their innocence after 8 years of unsuccessful efforts. But she wanted to emphasize how this has also affected people on the periphery, whether it be the lawyers who worked on this case on both sides of the spectrum, whether it be support services, neighbors, families of all the families involved. Even jurors have told me they were devastated by this case. So the Nicarico case, and for that matter every murder case, has numerous victims. And I wish there was a way to stop this way of life that we seem to experience in this country especially, but in society in general, where people just kill each other for no good reason. The other thing that Mrs. Cruz wanted to emphasize was that if this happened to her son, this can happen to anyone. And that's a fact. 6,000 people in this country are erroneously convicted every year of different crimes. Regretfully, it's women and minorities, people who cannot afford proper legal representation, who fall prey to this terrible, terrible injustice. Since we cannot correct prosecutors, since prosecutors believe that convicting is a business, and the more convictions they have on their books, the better they look on the ballot polls, all that is left to do is to turn to you, the potential jurors, and say to you, please listen carefully to the evidence presented against your peers, because this is what the jury system is all about. What might look as evidence may not be evidence. And we have to ensure that people that get their day in court. I've spoken to jurors in the Nicarico case. They took for granted things that were never presented. They took for granted that Steve Buckley and Dora Cruz and Alex Hernandez were friends. That they somehow had to be the perpetrators of this crime because that's what the state told them. But the state never presented evidence to show that those three guys were friends or ever committed a crime together. We're seeing the issue of erroneous convictions on television now all the time. Talk shows, mini television series are telling the stories of people who have been erroneously convicted. And I think the first reaction we have is, but how could this happen? It happens. And it happens because we, the people, the jurors, convict those people. So someone is not doing their homework. And that's what it boils down to. And we have to stop this trend. We have to guarantee that justice does prevail, that justice is not blind and only is fair to those who can afford to pay for it. I think this is perhaps one of the strongest messages of the Nicarico case. The next program is about the work of Amnesty International, a human rights organization that won the Nobel Peace Prize in 1977. Amnesty International fights on behalf, Amnesty International fights to release prisoners of conscience. They also try to take a very strong stand on abolishing the death penalty. Their opinions and their arguments are interesting, and I hope you enjoy watching this program. For Community Focus, I'm Hannah Bernstein. Goodbye.